have recovered from lunch, what excitement, and prepared yourself for the moment we've all been waiting for. He's one of the most articulate voices in the battle that we're all fighting against cancellation and the general nonsense of identity politics. He's written extensively. If you want and enjoy cutting analysis, read Free Speech and Why It Matters. And to really chill your blood, read The New Puritans. So, I love this man. I can say that. He's a gay man, I'm a lesbian. I love him for everything that he's done. He's a vital voice in this struggle. Please welcome Andrew Doyle.
So much. I really appreciate the invitation here, and thank you, of course, to Bev and Kate for organising this wonderful event, and for all of you turning up. So I have a lot to say. Let's get cracking. So I want to start with an anecdote. Many years ago, I used to be a regular performer at the Stand Comedy Club in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Newcastle. And many years ago, I was performing at the Stand in Edinburgh, and back then, they used to give out these little cards for feedback from the audience, and on one particular night, after we'd finished, we were reading the feedback. One of them said, you should book less gays. And I was absolutely shocked by this, because it should say fewer gays. But the thing is, it does make me think that times have changed really for the best. I mean, that sort of thing just wouldn't happen anymore. But other things have changed, and they haven't moved in the right direction necessarily. What I would say is this is the same comedy club, The Stand, that earlier this year cancelled the booking of SNP politician Joanna Cherry, who I know is here today, although eventually that went ahead, but only because of the threat of legal action. Now, if you'd have said to a member of the staff at the Stand Comedy Club, back in the days when I was a regular performer there, that one day they would be cancelling shows because members of staff found the opinions of those involved offensive, even a lesbian who had campaigned against Section 28, they would have laughed. They would have said that's not possible. You know, remember that this is the club that has developed some of the most outrageous, controversial comedic figures. People like Frankie Doyle cut his teeth at the Stand Comedy Club before he went wrong, you know. Because I think comedy needs to have the potential for causing offence. That is part of the deal. But something has changed in these intervening years, and I'd quite like to talk about what has happened and why that has happened, because I think a lot of us are confused. Now, it's not just the world of comedy, so I'd quite like to just try, if I can, a little thought experiment. So if everyone in here could just try to imagine who you were 10 years ago, in 2023, the kind of person you were 10 years ago, what you were doing, what your mindset was. And imagine if at that time, someone had suggested to you, back then, if they'd said to you, look, in 10 years' time, in a decade's time, in 2023, police will be routinely investigating UK citizens for non-crime. Thousands of people a year, in fact. Or in 10 years' time, free speech will be dismissed in the press as a right-wing talking point, and people who describe themselves as liberals will be calling for censorship. Or that in 10 years' time, activists will be demanding that statues of Winston Churchill, Mahatma Gandhi, even slavery abolitionists like Thomas Henry Huxley will be torn down, and that they would be taken seriously for that. Or that major corporations would be paying a fortune for visiting speakers to berate their staff for their white privilege, telling them they should try to be less white. I don't know how you do that. Bronzing pearls or something? I don't know. Or that some of the world's leading experts on race relations will be claiming that the ideal of colourblindness, which was so beautifully expressed by Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech, that that's actually racist. And that in promoting that dream, King was effectively promoting white supremacy. Or that one of the most prestigious schools in London will be segregating children by skin colour for after-school activities, or that a school district in Canada would be burning thousands of books because the contents are offensive to modern sensibilities, and that they would refer to this as a flame purification ceremony. this actually happened. Or that a film aimed at young people on the BBC would be saying that there are over 100 genders, teaching that to children, that teachers throughout the country would be doing the same. Or that politicians would stumble and stutter when they're asked, what is a woman? And that they would be unable to answer that question. Or indeed that woman would become a dirty word, that companies, that charities, that media outlets, even some factions of the NHS would start favouring phrases such as menstruators, bleeders, people with a cervix. Or that male rapists would be identifying as female, being moved into women's prisons. Or that healthy teenage girls should be encouraged by health professionals to get double mastectomies. That young effeminate boys would be told they're actually probably girls, they should be put on medication to halt puberty. Or that a lesbian speed dating event would be shut down because the organiser refused to include men. Or that the head of Stonewall, the charity that once did so much for gay rights, would be calling lesbians who don't want men in their dating pool sexual racists, comparing them to anti-Semites. Or that reputable medical journals would be denying biological reality, claiming that sex isn't binary at all, that it's a spectrum. Or that women would be fired from their jobs and subject to threats of death and rape for saying that biological sex is real. Or there would be people protesting outside a conference in the centre of London, which gay people have organised, by activists who claim to be on the right side of history, that they would be gathering to oppose gay rights in the name of progress. You know, if you'd have said that, if someone had said that to you 10 years ago, can you imagine what your reaction would be? You would have laughed at it. You would have said, none of that is possible in a free and liberal and sane society. But all of that is currently happening. And few could have anticipated any of it. Who here really thought that all of those old homophobic tropes that we all got used to when we were young, that they would be rejuvenated in the 2020s, but they would be rejuvenated by the very people who claim to be on the side of gay rights, the very people who fly the pride flag, or that ugly, distorted new version of the pride flag, called the progress pride flag, which now, as far as I'm concerned, represents the opposite of what it originally meant. It's a hideous eyesore. Just on aesthetic grounds, I oppose it. Do you know? I mean, surely gay people ought to be able to colour coordinate. So, and you know, we've all seen it. Social media is absolutely awash with the kind of phrases that I haven't heard since I was a youngster. You know, like, you can do a cursory search. You'll find gender ideologues calling gay men fags or faggots, or praising the murder of gay people and lesbians, even suggesting that we normalise homophobia. That's a phrase I've seen a number of times. Claiming that the AIDS epidemic was a positive thing. All of this is coming from these people with love wins, be kind in their bios. They claim that genital preferences are transphobic, that lesbians who don't include males in their dating pool must be suffering from trauma. Where have we heard that before? Gay rights was secured by recognising that a minority of people are instinctively attracted to members of their own sex, and this new ideology has turned up that rejects that notion entirely and then attempts to shame gay people for their orientation. So what has happened? I think what has happened here is that we as a society have mistaken change for progress. So it's often assumed that a lot of human existence, that human existence improves, that it's an invariable trajectory, that with the passage of time, each successive generation is going to be more enlightened than the last. But we know that that's not true. We know that societies can regress, and that liberal values, if they're not robustly defended, have a tendency to erode. I mean, it's no doubt that the Iranian Revolution of 1979 felt like a step in the right direction for Islamic fundamentalists. They thought it was great. But women, who bore the brunt of the reimposition of strict religious codes of conduct and dress, were, on the whole, less enthusiastic. We actually live in a society where it's very unusual what we have. You know, we live in a society where free speech is cherished by the majority of people. That's not normal. That's not normal in historical terms. It's not normal in global terms. And therefore, we can't be complacent about that. If we stop defending liberal values, such as free speech, such as gay rights, they go, they disappear. Now, similarly, when activists tell us that they are on the right side of history. What does that even mean? Now, that's just wishful thinking, really. It's a rhetorical trick that presupposes that they have all the answers. It was put very well by the writer Stephen Daisley. He wrote in The Spectator, he said, "One of the joys of living through a period of cultural revolution is watching all the new moralities arrive and declare themselves eternal truths." So while the triumph of civil rights and social liberalism over the past half-century is something to be cherished, complacency could well establish the conditions for its undoing. Now, of course, there's always this accusation that we're going to have to face, that older people just don't like change because older people are set in their ways. Many people in this room have been branded dinosaurs, yes? Okay, so the idea, because you have these old-fashioned ideas that, you know, there are two sexes, or gay rights are still important, you know, relics, all of you. And of course, as we get older, we do struggle with various changes in society because we're simply not accustomed to them. And this has always been the case. It amuses me to look at Aristophanes in his play The Clouds. There's a scene in The Clouds where one character is railing against the feckless and dissolute behavior of young men, typified by their habit of taking hot baths. And actually, the hydrotherapeutic benefits of hot baths are numerous. It lowers blood pressure and heart rate. It reduces muscle tension. It's a wonderful thing to do. What the hell did Aristophanes know? But it happens again and again. Older people are always struggling. But I don't think that it is curmudgeonly or antediluvian to make this distinction between change and progress, to understand that they're not the same thing. Now, we all know that gay rights were secured on this understanding, that some people are same-sex attracted. But with the increasingly common claim that biological sex is no longer important, that gay people are somehow bigoted if they're not attracted to people of the opposite sex, if they happen to identify differently, I would say that falls into the category of change. It does not fall into the category of progress. In the category of progress, we have equal rights for gay people, improved attitudes towards racial minorities, and so on. Now, I should also point out, and this is quite reassuring, so there's a note of optimism here. There was a report by the More in Common initiative that estimated that approximately 13% of our society in the UK would fit into the category of what people call woke culture, woke beliefs, or critical social justice, or whatever you want to call it. In other words, they are the people who believe in censorship, who believe that our entire understanding of reality is wholly constructed through language, the kind of people who have a kind of monomania about group identity and they can only see the world through that lens. Only 13%. Now, that means that they are a minority in all generations, not just the older generation. The difference is that they're a vocal minority and they're a powerful minority. And this does mean, I mean, we've seen it, some of the most vehement pushback against this has come from Generation Z, from those born between 1997 and 2012. Some of the most, you know, by contrast, some of the most vocal cheerleaders of the critical social justice movement are well into middle age. So I think to say this is a generational conflict is far too simplistic. And I think it's this confusion between change and progress that has led many to claim that the culture war is a right-wing myth, or that it simply doesn't exist. And the most common claim is that the culture war is a distraction. Have you heard this one? Ben Bradshaw, the Labour MP, for instance, he's warned that we need to resist the Tory culture war, he said, as though this culture war has been concocted by the very party that has presided over its worst excesses over the past 12 years. We had Joyce McMillan in The Scotsman saying that the SNP's gender recognition reform bill was being used as a culture war distraction. We had Matthew Parris writing in The Times. He said that this is not a real culture war and that if we, this is a quote, if we stop thinking about it, stop talking about it, it will finally go away. Will it really, Matthew? Because I don't think that's right. I don't think it's the case that the rising homophobia of our time, dressed up as progress, I don't think that's going to simply disappear if we ignore it, because progress generally doesn't happen by accident. As I say, the case for liberal values needs to be restated in every successive generation. Now, a cynic might take this view that all of this talk of distraction, that is a way to minimize the culture war. It's a tactic to kind of support the creeping authoritarianism of our times. But perhaps the better explanation is that culture warriors have been so successful in misleading the public when it comes to their methods and objectives. The claim that the culture war is a distraction, in other words, is in itself a distraction. And this is not to deny, right, that there are some woke gone mad stories in the national press, that they're frivolous, that they're silly. We can shrug off all this talk about vegan sausage rolls. I mean, they are disgusting, but you know what I mean. All these articles about how young people find sitcoms problematic if they're a few decades old. I think it's amusing. I don't know if you saw the article last year at the Globe Theatre were putting a trigger warning on Julius Caesar, saying that it contains scenes of murder. I think they mentioned knives and stage blood. But, you know, and if you don't know that, why are you going to see Shakespeare in the first place, you know? Similar trigger warnings at university on Julius Caesar, on plays like that. My favourite was actually at a Scottish university, which put a trigger warning on Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, because it said it contained scenes of graphic fishing. Now, so look, that's funny, it's silly, and you can laugh it off. But on the other hand, this ostensibly ridiculous stuff does point to a deeper, more troubling cultural malaise. So the point about trigger warnings are, in of themselves, you could say they're relatively harmless. But what they do signify is an ideological tendency to believe that words and violence are the same thing. Now, we see that with trans activists. They often make this claim that your words, your ideas are committing literal violence, actual genocide, even on people when they hear it. But when they punch feminists in the face, that's fine. That's just their free speech, right? There's all sorts of inconsistencies. So although we laugh at these stories and these ideas, there is something serious at the heart of it. If you say that books by Shakespeare and Ovid and Blake and Shaw, whatever it might be, that these are actually potentially dangerous, you put a trigger warning on, you're signifying that these are like little grenades ready to explode, that ideas can be harmful. It's an essentially illiberal idea. Now, and this has a knock-on effect. So there was a recent poll by Newsweek that found that 44% of Americans between the ages of 25 and 34 believe that misgendering should result in criminal prosecution. That's a significant number. In Ireland, of course, there are the new hate speech laws, which are similarly draconian to those that we've seen in Scotland. And these are the kind of laws that will, of course, be weaponized by people who want to shut up their opponents. They will try and use these laws against people who believe that there are only two sexes, in other words, the vast majority of people. We even think, potentially, that if Labour succeed in strengthening hate speech laws in the UK, we'll be facing the same problem. Now, I don't think all of these developments, I don't think they're a distraction. I think that this gets to the heart of the kind of society that we actually want to live in. Right? Those who say that the culture wars are a distraction, or that these are fringe concerns, that they're effectively saying that free speech doesn't matter, that women's rights don't matter, that gay rights don't matter. They're effectively saying it's absolutely fine if some women are sexually assaulted because of the dismantling of women's spaces, that it's fine to teach children an ideology whose logical endpoint is segregation by skin colour, that it's absolutely fine to have gay kids medicalised, and that it's fine for people to be arrested for the words they choose to say, that it's fine for academics and the media to lie to us so long as it's for our own good, and that all of this is just the price that we pay for progress. And the reason why the culture warriors have been so successful is that we haven't really taken a sufficient stand against them. That's why I'm so pleased that the theme of the LGB Alliance conference this year is courage, because I think that is absolutely key. Most people are intimidated, and others say, as I've said, that these issues simply don't matter. And remember, most of this has happened under the watch of the Tories. This really isn't an issue of left and right. The Tories haven't just failed to tackle the problem, they've been part of the problem. You cannot vote this out. Whichever major party you vote for, these ideas are embedded into the country. They are in every major institution. They're in academia, the media, the arts, corporate institutions, the civil service, the police, higher education. Absolutely everywhere. You can't get rid of it. It didn't come about by means of a democratic process, and therefore it cannot be eliminated by means of a democratic process. So I think when you hear people talking about how, oh, well, if you are concerned about these issues, you're just on the right, or sometimes even on the far right, because as we know, Hitler and Mussolini were really keen on free speech. It was their main thing, wasn't it? And the other reason, the other tactic that is used against us is that whenever someone criticizes the culture war, they're accused of being a participant in it, right? So, and The Guardian's a good example. This is the newspaper that has done more than any other publication to stoke the culture war, but its writers continually complain that those who criticize them for it are the true culture warriors. That is a real trick. We all know what actual progress looks like. I mean, if you had said to me 20 years ago that by 2023, the world's average life expectancy would have increased from 69 to 74, that the global infant mortality rate would have massively declined, that 65% of the world's population would have access to the internet, that thanks to advances in medical technology, fewer people would be dying of cancer and HIV, that gay people would have complete equality under the law, I would have said that that sounds like a future worth looking forward to. That is what progress looks like. But eroding the values of a liberal democracy, trashing the rights of women and gay people, undermining free speech, teaching children to see each other first and foremost in terms of their skin colour, none of these things are progress. They're just change, and we need to understand the difference. Thank you very much.